Thank you, Sam, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is a topic that is kind of like the old Rodney Dangerfield, for those of you who remember him. Gets no real respect. Website compliance and auditing is one of those things that you don't hear a lot about because it's not one of the sexier violations that examiners are going to cite. And when they get cited, it's not one of those things that goes into a public notice like flood or HMDA penalties as examples are both published and known by, I think, each agency other than the NCUA, although I haven't seen any from the CFPB yet, but it's still pretty new in their exam cycle. Anyway, there is a lot of issues that can come up and that can tend to bite a bank, so to speak, based on their website. This is also one of those things that you have to think about because your website is out there and archived, and your examiners have the ability to review it at pretty much any time at their discretion. And with some sites, they can go in and they can look at it at any given point in time. So when you put a violation out there and the examiners then come in to review your bank site and they say, okay, this particular page has a violation on it. How many times has this page been viewed? And your bank's going to have the metrics available somewhere, the hit count. Oh, well, that was viewed 175,000 times. Oh, 175,000 times people saw this error. So it really tends to make it look a little bit worse than when you have something that's on the radio or broadcast, because you don't really know how many people have viewed that, but you do know, based on the hit count, how many people have seen those violations. So that's kind of a big deal. Today, we're going to be talking about these things. We're going to talk about website management in the broad perspective because some of these things tie into e-sign and UETA, which is going to deal with federal and state contractual issues, disclosure issues. We're going to go over those probably kind of briefly. That's not the real focus for today. Then we're going to look at what to audit. What are some of the steps that I've gone through and that have proved beneficial for me, and what are some of the steps I went through that were not beneficial, because that's where you're going to receive some real benefit, is by not recreating the same mistakes that I had. So you're going to get some of the streamlined things that I have done that expedite this. We're going to be talking about website management because as a compliance officer or auditor, you have a key role in website management, and that's cited as a main problem. When a bank has problems on the website, the compliance officer / auditor are not involved, and you have marketing types who say, well, the flow of this page looks better without these pesky disclosures. Or you have IT who says, well, we move that over to this other page. No, it has to be here. We need that checkbox needs to be here, and it needs to be a multiple choice checkbox, not a radio button. We're going to be looking at some of these issues. Hopefully we're going to do both Q&A sessions. We've got one scheduled, I think, around slide 28. Usually I would go for halfway and then towards the end, but we had some questions that came in early, so I want to make sure that we address those. We do want to look at a walk-away break so that everybody gets a chance to take a breath, look and say, okay, well, here's a question that, collectively those of us in the room want to make sure we ask. And as Sam mentioned, you can submit questions for up to an hour after that. As we begin first thing I want to do is review some of the materials you have, and if you didn't print them, it's not critical that you do so now, but it is something that you'll want to look at later. I need to thank Pat Cashman. She has her own consulting business in Dallas, Cashman Compliance. She created one of the checklists that she allowed me to include in your documents. There's another less detailed one that's actually available on the BOL site from Deborah Wetzel that is provided to you so that you can have a choice and a variation. You can go very detailed. You can go kind of broad and overview of the pages of the website itself. So there's a variation on the audits if you want to look at it from that particular standpoint. What's the difference between what you got and what's available in the BOL download page. Well, the difference is I've gone in and made sure that I updated the citations for those where the CFPB has taken ownership of certain of the regulations, and the numerals have changed so that you're going to be able to go in and find those citations a little bit easier. So those have been updated. When you ask about how do I need to review my website or why, are my examiners really looking at this, as I began to prepare for this, I looked at the standpoint of when is your website going to be looked at? Well, it can be examined during a safety and soundness exam. It can be examined during an IT exam. It can be reviewed with any number of them. One regulatory agency that I spoke with said that they essentially had 600, they looked at their last 600 reviews for websites. 57% were done when they had a full scope exam. 20% were targeted just to looking at that particular website. 6% were done during IT exams. So I assume the difference was done during compliance exams. The moral of the story is different agencies will do them at different times, but it depends on the need. It depends on the risk. It depends on their schedule of availability as to when they're going to target and look at those websites. They might, the FDIC used to do some sweeps. I'm not sure if they still do sweeps, but it comes down to say that your website can be reviewed at any point in time. So your examiners can look at it during any of these exams if they feel that there's a need to. One of the things, I used to have a sign on my desk when I was in the bank, and I borrowed it and changed it a little bit from a John Wayne movie, but it said, "More sweat in audits, less blood in exams." So the more that you put into your own audit, the less your examiners are going to have to look at. And that's obviously the mark of a good exam. When your examiners have very few comments, when everything looks like it's good, that means that you did all the work on the front end, and that's exactly what you're after. So what we want to do is discuss the component requirements of websites. We're not going to go through all of these work papers, but I do want to point out the one from Deborah Wetzel as an example. This is why people need to think about the website as in, well, it's not just a website. Some of the issues that you would have to look at in her documents include retention, updates, advertising issues, copyrights, trademarks, and service marks. That's an area that you don't hear a lot about, but when you do, it's because it's probably a big thing. Then there's privacy, there's BSA, you've got Reg B, fair housing, potentially HMDA, CRA, truth in lending, Reg E, e-sign, funds availability, RESPA, truth in savings. There's a lot that goes into it. Then you can also include things like COPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. We'll talk about that just briefly towards the end. Not many banks have any issues with that, but it's because it's not a target that banks go after. But if it turns out that your bank does have something going on with applicable COPA, then you want to know, why is it applicable? How is this going to tie in? What do I have to worry about? ADA compliance is in there as well, although ADA compliance is not a huge issue because there was one court ruling that went in and said that the website is not an extension of the bank. It's not a virtual branch. I'm not sure that I truly agreed with that ruling, but it did save banks from having to worry about ADA compliance and ensuring that there was going to be I guess, a tolerance amount that where a bank would look and say, this is new technology, and we're not going to participate in this because it won't translate to the ADA requirements very well. And so banks don't have to worry about ignoring those. But you still need to think about ADA compliance because you don't want a complaint about it. There have been numerous complaints, especially from the blind, who would go in and say, the bank site doesn't work, here's why, and there would be issues as a result of that. So there's certainly reputational risk, even if they would have an unsuccessful suit. So it's one of those things, though, that your bank might look at and say, well, we're going to be very sensitive to this, or it might be we're going to consider it, but it's not going to be the main focal point. So it is something that your webmaster, your auditor, your compliance officer needs to at least be familiar with. And then you've got Pat Cashman's audit checklist, which is about 17 pages, and it is more of the traditional audit list where you're going to go through, here's the question, yes, no, I have some comments about this, and these documents were provided to you in Word so you can change them, you can customize it to your financial institution's needs, you can update it if I missed any of the citations changes. You can say, well, these things don't apply, so we're going to pull these out for now. We'll save a copy of this, but we're going to pull these things out. So you've got those. The other thing that you've got also in